A beautiful morning to you. The program is the Dailies, the network television, where we look at some of the happenings on the paper, where we're seeing that the U.S. is saying they are still observing the election, and very soon they'll come up with their own conclusion concerning what actually happened during the election. So our fingers are crossed regarding that. We have quite a number of other stories on the paper. We're looking at the job market, number of unemployment and employment, those in the workforce and those who are not in the workforce. So quite a number of things on the paper, so please do well to contribute and drop you comment on that stories. I will be doing this program alongside Rachel Tenzi. Good morning.
Morning, Sally.
All right, we'll be running straight into the paper, and Rachel will take us through the first paper for today.
On Nigerian Tribune, we have a front page comment that talks about Nigeria's peculiar petrol pricing confusion. You can start with details on the front page. Adeleke reduces work days for Osun workers, extends palliative payment. Tinubu declines assent, returns bill on new retirement age for National Assembly workers. Abdul Samad Rabiu donates 2 billion naira to support Maiduguri flood victims. The big story on the paper concerns as CBN raises interest rate to 27.25%. The writer says manufacturers to continue paying high interest rates, tightening of MPC detrimental to investment and economic growth, CCPE is saying. NACCIMA expresses concern, least impact on businesses and inflation. Over 4 million Nigerians unemployed in 2023. This is a statistics from the Bureau of Statistics. You can find details of these stories on page 5. Dangote advocates total fuel subsidy removal. Pengasan to federal government, increase your shareholding in Dangote refinery to 45%. Tinubu sends Kekere Kun's name 21 RMAFC commissioners to Senate for confirmation. Justice Nyako withdraws from Nnamdi Kanu's trial. This is concerning Biafra. On Edo election, observers should not observe INEC rules, APC's Carpet Yeager Africa. Polls fell short of credibility requirements. Statement from observers. Police arrest 6, recovers weapons, 50 voters cut. 2 feared drowned as flood hit Ibadan. Details can be found on page 26, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On First News newspaper, actress Toyi Tomato to women, stay with your cheating husbands, avoid divorce. You can read why she made that comment. Act now, Nigerians can't survive this economic hardship where we are. This is coming from Ujikalu warns Tinubu. Nigerians' unemployment rate rises to 5.3% in the first quarter of 2024, coming from the NBS. Naira brumate against dollar following CBN 5th interest rate hike. Army discharges female soldier who accused superior of sexual harassment. Army discharges female soldier who accused superior of sexual harassment. Well, we hope that all has been done. We will recall that story was actually trending as of a time. And here we're seeing that she has been discharged from the army. Do well to read more detail of that. Justice Nyako withdraws from Nnamdi Kanu's case amid claims of bias. And the big story on the paper, CBN hikes interest rate to 27.25%. Tougher times ahead for Nigerians as inflation fight intensifies. You can do well to read more detail of this story. As well, we have Secondo sound alarm, 2027 election at risk under APC rule. APC Islam Yaga Africa for questioning Edo election outcome. Do well to read more detail in the paper. We have this very great picture story here, looking at the BUA group chairman and then with other representative of the group executive directors. And this was during a courtesy visit to Professor Babagana Zulum, the governor of Borno State. During the visit, BUA group donate 2 billion naira, 1 billion naira in cash, and then 1 billion naira in food items to support the flood victims in Maiduguri. You can do well to get the paper in more detail of the story, and that's all on First News newspaper.
On Leadership newspaper, federal government to launch new school curriculum next month. APC tackles Yaga Africa over Edo poll report. We have trending PDP rejects Edo governorship results. Numbers, ship owners worry over $86 billion annual loss to foreigners. The UNGA 79, Tinubu's 6th permanent UN Security Council seat for Nigeria and Africa. Matawale denies links with bandits, demands proof. The big story on the paper, blame Buhari for current economic hardship. A statement from the Central Bank of Nigeria says Tinubu inherited battered economy. We're battling with repercussions of 35 trillion naira ways and means. Stakeholders raise concern over 27.25% interest rate. Justice Nyako hands off Kanu's trial. Dangote seeks end to petrol subsidy. 5 police officers die in Zaria Kano auto crash. 86 million Nigerians living in multidimensional poverty. Action 8 is saying. You can find details of their statement on page 14, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
I wonder when our government will wake up to how bad the Zaria Kano road is, Richard. I'm very, very upset. I'm very sad concerning this. We keep having number of people dying on that road. I just cannot help but wonder, what is the government doing? We are very, very aware that this is as a result of the bad road. If you've been around that Zaria Kano, you know how bad that road is. Sometimes if it's dry season, if you're not careful, you don't tend to see the car coming in front of you, and then we could see that even if other factors are here, but then we know that the road is the number one factor here. And then it breaks my heart because here we're having about 5 of our police officers. I won't forget the immigration officers that we lost on that same road on their way coming back, or was it going, one of the two. So really, I hope that the government will wake up, because I mean, just like I keep saying concerning other matters, this is at the time where we're supposed to have, you know, past issues such as this a long time ago, but we keep coming back to seeing here part of the thing that the government should have done that they are not doing. Here we're seeing CBN telling us to blame the Buhari for why we are having our economy bad, but then I believe that the present administration was very, very aware of what had happened before you took over leadership. So we are hoping to see, rather than exchanging of blames, we see people taking up responsibility, owing up to the fact that we can do something to rectify some of the wrongs that are happening. So our fingers are crossed, and we hope to see a government and administration that is willing to take on the blame and do the right thing, rather than pointing a finger at an administration.
So for once, I think I would like to agree with the current administration and then the report from the Central Bank of Nigeria. We've sat down here, we've talked about how it's not appropriate for an administration to come in here and keeps pointing a finger. We've seen administrations 4 years later still blaming past administrations. Now the truth is, every administration comes in and meets inherited problems. There's no doubt Buhari inherited problems from Goodluck administration. That Goodluck inherited problems from the previous.
Well, so
exactly,
we keep going back.
it is right. But let's be honest, as Nigerians, we started having issues concerning our currency. We look at the cash crunch we had. We look at the designing of the new naira notes, which was not needed in the first place. And all it caused within inflation, within scarcity. And also, it also made our currency to devalue as against the dollar. Now, Sele, 35 trillion naira ways and means is a huge money. We cannot push that sum of money aside. It is not a sum of money that you can push under the carpet. And even before we had the administration going, we talked about it a lot of times, even on business and finance, how it has been bastardized. That how could you take out so much money and nothing to show for it? And even few months before the president left office, approved the remaining. And who is going to account for that kind of money? So we are looking at a huge amount of money that cannot be accounted for, that failed in achieving what it was meant for. And you can't help but ask, how did they get it wrong at that period of time? So if we have President Tinubu 1 year later, his administration coming out to say, you know what, or the Central Bank of Nigeria precisely saying, you know what, the ways and means is taking a toll on us, because this is money that was taken, this is money that was borrowed, it was taken out from us, and now we try try to cover up for it because it doesn't have a dividend to show for it. There's no profit for it yet. For the anchor borrowers loan scheme and all of that, it's almost like the water was just the money was just taken away by water and all of that. So if we have the central bank coming out and say, you know what, this, I think is not one of those things that we can just say no, the administration is just talking. We are about to face another era of complaining. This is something that needs to be looked into it, and we can't just sit down and let this money go for whatsoever reason. These ways and means, we can't just sit down. I don't know what the current administration plans on doing, how to recover it, how to make sure such mistakes, I don't know how they plan to recover entirely from the gap or the hole created by these ways and means money. But we can't just neglect the fact that it is something big and it has its effect on our economy. And then we can talk about our federal road seller. If a government in a state refuse to fix roads within its state, it's a different game entirely. But the federal roads have no business whatsoever to be bad. It means we've had administrations upon administration and nobody has cared to fix federal roads, because these are interstate roads, and we know that roads that link one state to another are federal roads, and they are solely the responsibility of the federal government. And if we continuously have the Kano Zaria road claiming lives, then it means that something needs to be done about it. For whatsoever reason, they should be the safest road, they should be the best road. It is a sign that we have a government at the federal level that is truly in the business of taking care of its country. And then when you enter a state and it looks like a slum, that's the business of the state government. But when we are talking about federal roads, I believe the government needs to wake up. I know so much is going on concerning the Ibadan Expressway and all of that, but when you look at it, well, yes, it links other states and all of that, but we are also seeing state governors who are calling upon the federal government and are getting work done at their own region. So what is happening in the north? Because the state government also needs to call the attention of the federal government and say, you know what, we need this done, even if it means partnering with the federal government just to make sure that the roads bringing people, connecting people to your state, it means so much. Businesses will thrive, development will come to you, but when certain accesses are not there, your state will be isolated eventually, no matter what. So I just hope that more than the federal government doing something, that the state government also take it as a burden. Even if it's attacked or called a federal road, it links people to your own state, and you need that activity to keep going on, or you become isolated and you do not grow as expected. So I just hope that this is also a challenge to the state governors to be able to stay on the neck of the federal government and say we need our routes fixed.
And if not, because most of the states are in debt, I believe that if they have their way, they will be able to fix the roads, and then the federal government pay them back. We've seen that happening several times in other states, where we see state governors, you know, making sure that the federal routes are being made, and then the federal government pays them back. And just like you said, I mean, concerning the ways and means, Rachel, you remember clearly when we were blaming the lawmakers. How on earth would you approve that? And what is even more annoying is the fact that most of the lawmakers are still in this present administration. So, I mean, I just want to see what will happen if the president asks you for a certain amount of money and tell him, no, we're sorry, we can't. We need to give us a blueprint of what you intend to do with this money. Few months, I mean, you're about leaving. So what do you intend to do in the next 5 or 4 months? Barely, you're trying to, you know, pack up, clear up, looking for your files, arranging it to give the next person. So what can you do between that time? So right now, I think, just like you said, of course, this is money that we cannot just close our eye. But I'm looking forward to a house. I'm looking forward to lawmakers that will realize their power and exercise it as expected. Not saying that you would disregard the executive, no. But saying the fact that you know what you should do, things you should approve and things you should say no to, regardless of who is asking for it. Because you know that in the long run, I mean, we are going to suffer for it, just like we are seeing presently what is happening. So we hope to see better measures taken by our lawmakers. Well, let's take a look at another paper, which is the Vanguard newspaper. Amidst rising poverty, money supply increases 62% to 107 trillion naira. You can find that story on page 19. Federal government welcomes Ombudsman ruling over Daily Trust in currently report on Samoa agreement. You can read that on page 8. 2 million security personnel can't protect over 200 million Nigerians. This is coming from the chief of the army staff. You can do well to read more detail on page 10. And this is where we keep saying let's have more being recruited so that they will be able to protect this number of Nigerians. Tinubu reject the bill seeking to raise retirement age of National Assembly staff. You can find that story on page 9. The big story, which seems to be on most of our paper, is concerning unemployment that is up by 5.3% as CBN hike interest rate to 27.25%. Now we have some writer on the saying interest rate hike detrimental to investment, economic growth. This is coming from experts. Cost of funds will be further escalated. This is coming from the NACCIMA president. Banks, financial institutions may witness more bad debts. As well, we have unemployment reality on ground is far worse. This is coming from Renaissance Africa Company. Dangote refinery will reduce FX pressure coming from Cardoso. You can read more detail of all these on page 5. Still talking about the UN General Assembly, U.S. Chamber of Commerce vote $320 million for mortgage financing SMEs and others in Nigeria. Deny ties with banditry by swearing on Quran. Matawali challenges Zamfara Governor General Kusan. You can do well to read that on page 22. Reaction trade Dangote's call for petrol subsidy removal, where we saw he said that during an interview on Bloomberg. You well to read that on page 20. And on Edo poll, why INEC must probe officials involved in rigging. Why INEC must probe officials involved in rigging, coming from Yaga Africa. The writer say APC to the group, don't turn yourselves into parallel agency. More detail on page 7. Inflation orders have tested society's fabric. This is coming from the Senate. And on sport, why I can't buy Arsenal again. This is coming from Dangote. We have the picture story Shetima meet OACPS scribe. You can see the picture story over there where they're sharing a handshake. This was during the UNGA in New York recently. And that's all on Vanguard newspaper.
On Daily Independent newspaper, drama in court as Justice Nyako withdraws from trial of Nnamdi Kanu. Inadequate funding, manpower impeding our performance, statement from Army Chief. The big story, Nigerians grappling with realities of soaring living costs, a statement from Akpabio says challenges testing very fabric of our society. Tinubu asks Senate to confirm Kekerekun as CJN. Nigeria's unemployment rate increased to 5.3% the first quarter of 2024. We have a federal government compliant ombudsman says Daily Trust breached media professional standards. U.S. Chamber of Commerce commits $320 million to mortgages SMEs in Nigeria. Tourist experts canvass reduction in visas via adoption of technology. Army discharges female soldier who accused officer of sexual harassment. You can find details of this story on page 6. Still on the paper, we will continue to increase rates as inflation rises, but we've recorded 2 months of inflation being the same or reducing. However, we are seeing the Central Bank of Nigeria taking a different turn entirely, where we have the writer saying CBN raises MPR to 27.25%, CRR to 50%. States need to curtail excess liquidity amid FX demand pressure. The last story on the paper, power struggle, main cause of conflicts in Nigeria and Africa, statement from Jonathan. And that's all the news on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, alleged terrorism, Justice Nyako withdraws from Kanu's trial, return case file to Chief Justice. Detail found on page 5. Nigeria's unemployment rate increases to 5.3% in first quarter of 2024. CBN raised interest rate by 50 basic points to 27.25%. You can read that in the front page and as well continue on page 25. Federal government issue flood alert in Benue, Adamawa, Anambra, Bayelsa. Also, 8 other states deploy personnel and equipment. Do well to read more details of that in the paper. Laduja, our generation has failed Nigeria. Give tips on how to end crisis in the oil sector. You can read that in the paper. Dangote explain why fuel subsidy must go. Now we're seeing contradicting what the federal government have been saying over the years. As well, we have Samoa agreement. Media ombudsman ordered Daily Trust to apologize to the federal government. Tackles the government for delay in explaining the agreement. You can read more detail on page 27. Apabio Kadu lament rising inflation, high cost of living. Well, we can see the picture story here where the Senate President was exchanging pleasantries with the Chairman Committee on Privatization, Dr. Oji Ozokadu, at the resumption of the plenary in Abuja yesterday. And that's all on Daily Trust newspaper.
On Voice of Liberty, federal government set to implement new minimum wage. NAS settle for joint probe of economic sabotage in petroleum sector. Dangote Petrol will ease transport cost and food prices, a statement from CBN. The big story, 2024 World Maritime Day. Ahmed Tijani Ramalan commends Nigeria, urges holistic evaluation of seafarers' capacity development program. As the world celebrates the 2024 World Maritime Day, the pioneer chairman, Board of NIMASA, and currently the National Seafarers Welfare Board trustee, Alhaji Dr. Ahmed Tijani Ramalan, has urged the federal government to commit to a continuous review of all seafarers' capacity development programs. Still on the paper, jubilation as Ubasani floods 253 PHCs with drugs. This is in Kaduna. On Edo election, LP blames Obi Apata for defeat. Justice Yako withdraws from Nnamdi Kanu's trial. Petrol may hit 2,000 naira per litre over Dangote subsidy scrapping call. A statement from stakeholders, and that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
That's where we see, Nigerians are asking the federal government to just come out clear and state, are you paying the subsidy or not? Because the stakeholders here are stating the fact that petrol may get up to 2,000 naira if over Dangote subsidy scrapping call. But the government said that they are no longer paying it. So sometimes just come and just have a way of taking you back, and then you just can't help but ask the federal government to come out clean and actually let Nigerians know, are we paying or are we not paying subsidy? Severally, we've heard the NNPC coming out as well to say, just like you keep mentioning the word technically, and we just hope they explain what technically means. But then we'll keep our fingers crossed and look at what the government will say regarding that. Now we'll be looking at the Metrics newspaper, where we have over 385 billion naira owed in unpaid electricity bill. This is coming from the Nigerian Electricity Consumers. Do well to read more detail of that in the paper. As well, still on Metrics, unemployment time bomb hits 5.3% in the first quarter of 2024. Youth unemployment drops to 8.4%. Worries as more youth are getting discouraged from seeking employment. This is a report coming from the NBS. 2 million security personnel can't protect 200 million Nigerians, say Army Chief. Senate to screen acting CGN Kekere Eku today. You can read that on page 9. The big story concerning the MPC meeting, reactions trail interest rate hike. It is detrimental to investment, economic growth, CPPE laments. Multiple interest rate hikes boosting Nigerians' confidence in Naira, coming from the CBN. CBN to boost liquidity in banks with 1.4 trillion Naira supply in 3 months, coming from Kaduso. Subsidy removal, I disagree with Dangote, coming from Toye Okupe. You can read that on page 9. NDLEA re-arrest cartel at Lagos airport with cocaine worth over 4.6 billion naira. Stop constituting parallel agency over Edo poll result. APC tells Yaga Africa. You read that on page 3. We have picture story counting Finland support for UN Security Council permanent seat. And on entertainment, Banky W finally relocates to the US as he's running for his master's. So he will be there for the next 1 year or so. You do well to read that on page 21. And that's all the Metrics newspaper.
On Daily News Hub, 5 policemen returning from Edo election killed in Kano. The big story, our stand on Edo governorship election, a statement from the U.S. government, says poll widely when monitoring situation. Swear with Quran you know nothing about banditry, Matawale replies Zamfara governor. CBN raises interest rate to 27.25%. Mariam Idris wins silver award in 2024 Commonwealth Essay competition. On terrorism, Justice Yako rescues self from Kanu's case as IPOP leader says persecution of Igbo stops with me. Stay of execution, Philip Shaibu floors Obaseki and others again as court finds Edo governor speaker orders 200,000 naira each. Bielsa hotel owner threatens to drag IGP to court over 625 million naira lodging debt. No, rather 62.5 million naira lodging debt. Over 4 million Nigerians without jobs in 2023. Vigilante gunned down notorious Zamfara bandit leader Kachala and Sons recover 2 AK-47 rifles, machine gun and cash. Still on the paper, Nigerians grappling with harsh realities of inflation, a statement from the Senate President. Tinubu seeks Senate confirmation of Kekere-kun as CJN, and that's all the news on Daily News Hub.
Right, we'll just take that time out right now to take a time out and let you go through the story, show them. We have quite a number where we're saying that talking about unemployment, it has increased, as well as we are looking at reactions coming from US, and then other stories on the front page of the paper regarding whether or not the government is paying for subsidy, as Dunguti stately declared that the federal government should scrap that totally. So we would love to hear your own feedbacks concerning that. When we come back, we will continue the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thanks for staying tuned in still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper, which before we went on the break, we were looking at the CBN increasing the interest rate again to about over 27%, as well as we are also looking at, various reactions concerning unemployment, as we're seeing that about 4 million Nigerians are unemployed. That is as of last year. So presently, it seems the number is increasing. So we would love to hear your own contributions regarding that story. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Concerning banditry, Zamfara governor report defense minister to the NSA. You can read detail of that on page 20. CBN banks sell $9 billion as Naira weakens to 1,670 Naira to a dollar. Concerning Edo, APC dismisses poll fraud, police recovers stolen beavers. You can read that on page 2. Still on UNGA 79, Tinubu seek debt forgiveness for Nigeria. You can read that on page 2. The big story concerning subsidy, federal government may spend 236 billion naira monthly on imported Dangote petrol. The writer say marketers, others seek Dangote on subsidy removal. Miman lifts over 50 million liters of Dangote petrol. New interest rate may worsen bad loans. This is coming for operational private sector. Concerning Kanu, court drama as judge steps down. You can read that on page 29. Federal government explain minimum wage July 29 back pay. You can read that on page 7. Lagos man jail 8 years for child molestation. Works begin on federal government 2025 budget that you can find on page 7. We have the picture story here where we can see the prince of, or rather governor of Ogun State with other councils of Obas. This was during a visit to the traditional rulers council in Abeokuta on Tuesday, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, Edo poll, 5 returning police officers dead, 11 others injured in auto crash. NDLEA nabs ex-convict with 4.6 billion naira worth of cocaine at MMIA. AFCC investigates officers over 15 million naira bribe allegation by cross-dresser Bob Risky. Fresh cholera outbreak kills over 41 in Jigawa. Tinubu throws out tenure elongation bill for National Assembly officers. The big story on the paper, Nigerian Army dismisses female soldier who accused senior officers of sexual harassment. Why Justice Binta Yako withdrew from Nnamdi Kanu's trial. Inflation cripples Nigeria's construction sector as developers struggle to keep projects afloat. We have a picture where we can see makeshift structures constructed by homeless residents of Maiduguri and aftermath of the recent collapse of Alu Dam that led to the tragic loss of lives in Borno. This photo was taken on Tuesday, and that's all the news on the Daily Times.
On the Guardian newspaper, still looking at the issue of unemployment, where we're having growing jobless, self-employed Nigerians deem tax potential. Now we have an overview of the Nigerian labor market. Now we're looking at the working age population. Under the labor force, for those who are unemployed, we have about 5.3%. For those who are employed part-time, we have 84%. For those who are employed full-time, we have about 73.2%. Now, those who are not in the workforce, those who are not looking for any work, we have about 3.6%. Those who are retired, about 36.2%. And then those who are informal employment, we have about 92.7%. So you can do well to read more detail concerning all of this. Still on the Guardian newspaper, Tinubu advocates multilateralism, permanent UNSC, seat debt forgiveness. You can do well to read that on page 3. Judge rescues self from Nnamdi Kanu's treason trial. Senate resumes, urges action on economic and security challenges. 5,225 slain officers benefit cost police 15.6 billion naira in a year. Concerning the NPR, concern over job cuts, food hike at CBN says nation not yet out of the woods. Dangote advocate total subsidy removal, and we have Okupe disagrees with that. Do well to read that on page 5. Police invite leader of the Oktoberfest #End Bad Governance planned protests. PDP won against alleged ploy to rig Ondo Guber poll, detailed on page 7, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Business Times newspaper, 1 minute. The Business Times newspaper. All right. The big story on the Business Times newspaper, experts fault MPC decision to hike MPR by 50 basis points to 27.25%. Lifting petrol from Dangote refinery will moderate FX pressure, says Cardoso. Banks recapitalization, SEC guidelines make process transparent and stable. Nigeria's unemployment rate increased to 5.3% in the first quarter of 2024, a report from the National Bureau of Statistics. NURC receives 1,220,245 complaints on metering overbilling in 2023. $3.5 billion Bakassi deep sea port construction to begin soon. Inflation cripples Nigeria's construction sector as developers struggle to keep projects afloat. Why federal government should end petrol subsidy? Statement from Dangote. I disagree with Dangote on complete subsidy removal, says Okupe. I believe this statement back and forth tells us the fact that the federal government is still paying some subsidy. You can find details of their statement on page 2, and that's all the news on the Business Times.
All right, let's look at another business world, talking about Business Day newspaper. Flour mills to buy out minority shareholders after regulatory approval. Detail of that can be found on page 35. Jobless rate rises on multinationals exit factory closures. You can read detail of that on page 34. Now we're seeing some of the factors that are behind the increase of unemployment that we have in the country. Entrepreneurship critical to economic renaissance, crisis prevention, coming from Elumedu. And the big story here, interest rate hike, ice inflation, naira stability. Cardoso says money supply grew by 35 trillion naira in 8 years. And we have the picture story where we can see the director talking about Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala and other directors during the World Trade Organization, and Aliko Dangote, president, where we can see him there. This was during the launch of the Global African Gateway initiative at the African Center in New York. And that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, leaked Vinicius Jr. beats Rodri to win 2024 Ballon d'Or. Ronaldo, Messi top list of 10 world-class players on free transfer in 2025. Rashford buys £200,000 Bentley after getting 6 months driving ban. The big story on the paper, Chelsea begins fresh talk over Osimhen. Galatasaray insists he won't leave in January. Rodri to undergo further tests in Barcelona. Gunners ready to offer Trossard new contract. Man United preparing bid for Berla. You can find details inside the paper. Barca may tempt Szczesny out of retirement. PSG initiates contract talks with Hakimi. Arsenal says Saliba non-transferable. You can find details inside the paper. I regret not buying Arsenal. A statement from Dangote, and on other papers we saw why he can't buy Arsenal again. Umar Sadiq injured again, sits out of training. Gives Auburn rated Lyons flop against Marseille. The boys wants Anthony Joshua or Usyk rematch. Details at the back page, and that's all the news on Sporting Sun.
All right, let's look at a few other papers, and let's look at the Nation newspaper, where we have third judge withdraws from Kanu's trial amid drama. Rising interest rate, best way to battle the inflation, says Cardoso. As governor, I never back bandits, says Matawale. EFCC probe Bobrisky 15 million naira bribery claim. More detail of the story can be found in the paper. Tinubu seek debt forgiveness for developing nations, where we have President tell West to return looted funds. NBS report unemployment rate rose to 5.3% in the first quarter. You can turn to page 5 for that story. NNPCL, Dangote refinery rolls rages over price of petrol. Dangote, we sold below landing cost of imported fuel. We bought at 898 naira oil giant insists. You can read detail in the paper. APC lashes Yaga Africa for subjective report on Edo poll. US NBA hailed the peaceful election. Police arrest 6, recover weapons and voter cards. Downside, Tinubu reject the bill seeking to extend retirement age of National Assembly workers. These are found on page 3, and that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On this day newspaper, CBN maintains monetary tightening regime, raises MPR further to 27.25%, hikes bank CIR to 50% from 45%, merchant banks rate to 16% from 14%. Nasima CPPE says stifling financial condition to address liquidity issues detrimental to investment and economic growth. Africa's richest person, Aliko Dangote, backs total fuel subsidy removal. At 79 UNGA, Tinubu seeks debt forgiveness for Nigeria and developing nations, says pursuit of individual national priorities undermining resolutions of global challenges, insists on permanent seat for Nigeria or the African nations at UN Security Council. The big story is a statement from Jonathan Edo Guba poll is proof technology can't solve our electoral challenges, says politicians with dirty minds will still manipulate process, canvasses attitudinal changes. Secondus, APC has buried Nigeria's democracy, 2027 won't come. Ruling party wants Yaga Africa. Statement from Oshamole Obaseki is politically dead. U.S. government urges stakeholders to support process of challenging poll results. And we have a picture. Technical Committee of the Southern Nigerian Traditional Rulers Council visits Abiodun, and that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, Samoa agreement, federal government launches ombudsman ruling against Daily Trust. Drama as Justice Nyako withdraws from Nnamdi Kanu's trial, that you can find on page 6. Jaiz Bank donates over 100 million naira, Binani 50 million naira to Borno flood victims. AFCON qualifier Libya appoints new Grafa ahead clash with Super Eagles. You can read that on page 32. Amid negative press, Sokoto working under Governor Aliu. This is coming from Dan Chadi, detail found in the paper. Expert differ as CBN raises lending rates to 27.25%. The writer said decision will address major forex and inflation threats. No, it has the tendency to slow down investment, coming from Muda Yusuf. Dangote Refinery, oil marketers promise reduced fuel price, and we have Aliko Okupe disagree over the subsidy regime. Maiduguri flood relief fund hit 7.5 billion naira, 5,235 victims benefit so far. 5 police officers killed, 11 injured in Kano auto crash. Digital loan providers surge demand rise amid economic struggles. At the UNGA 79, Olumelo Cindy McCain addressed African youth unemployment and a hunger. You can do well to find more detail of that in the paper. We have a cartoon on the front page where we're seeing Oshunko jail hungry artisan for stealing 3 yam tubers, and it replies, say at least he wouldn't suffer hunger in prison. That's on a lighter note. Well, that's all on Blueprint newspaper. Thank you so much, Rich, for
You're welcome, Feli.
as well. Thank you to our viewers and every other person who made the program a success. We look forward again to doing this tomorrow. Please do have a lovely day ahead.